Hohenheim extended his free hand, and a glowing magic circle flared to life. A barrage of fireballs erupted from it, soaring toward Madame Eight Legs. Each one struck its target, but the monstrous spider remained still, completely unfazed. Behind him, Dolores raised an arm to shield her face from the heat while Sinclair gripped her staff tightly, eyes fixed on the unfolding battle. Hohenheim began recharging his mana, preparing to launch another volley. Frustration tightened his jaw. He couldn't understand why his flame magic had no effect. She was a bug-type monster. Fire should have been her weakness. Hohenheim remembered the moment from just hours ago. He, Granola, Dolores, and Sinclair had been sprinting toward the monster with urgency in every step. Ahead of him, one of the Baskerville triplets stood poised, sword in hand, ready to face the looming threat. Hybro glanced back at Hohenheim, his tone flat as he explained the situation. It was pointless. Unless the fire he uses is hellfire, then he won't be able to deal any meaningful damage to it. He also pointed out that her exoskeleton was far too tough for a direct assault to break through. He went on to explain that while her legs were structurally weaker than the rest of her body, attacking them came with a risk. Whenever she was cut, she had the terrifying ability to multiply. Her only true vulnerability lay in the thin cracks scattered across her exoskeleton. Meanwhile, on the other side of the forest, Middlebrow led the charge with Vikier, Lovegood, and Jurassico close behind. Even if Hohenheim's attacks couldn't harm Madame directly, his fireballs still served a purpose. They kept her attention. That distraction was exactly what Vikier's group needed to slip in close and strike at her weak points. Hohenheim turned to Hybro, curiosity flickering across his face. While he appreciated the triplets' insight and strategy, he couldn't help but wonder, how did they know so precisely how to fight Madame Eight Legs? Hybro glanced away, a bit awkward, recalling Vikier's words from earlier. Don't tell them I told you. Just play it off. Avoiding Hohenheim's gaze, he mumbled that he'd encountered Madame in the forest once before. Everything he knew, he claimed, came from surviving that encounter. Not lingering on the explanation, Hybro quickly shifted the conversation. If they followed his lead, he said, they'd have a real chance at defeating Madame Eight Legs. Madame Eight Legs opened her gaping maw and released a thunderous, defiant roar. Thick saliva sprayed through the air, raining down on Hohenheim. Her many eyes gleamed with fury. She had grown tired of his relentless fireballs. Channeling mana into her legs, she shifted targets and launched herself toward Dolores's group with terrifying speed. Hohenheim's eyes narrowed as he watched the spider charge. He clenched his fist and shouted to the others, warning them that they wouldn't be able to hold her attention much longer. On the opposite side of the battlefield, Lovegood stepped forward with unhurried grace, the tip of her staff dragging gently across the ground. As she walked, a trail of pink mist spilled from the staff, and wherever it touched, vibrant flowers bloomed. Then she began to spin the staff above her head, a confident smile playing on her lips. She announced that Dolores and her team had bought her enough time. Mana surged through her body and flowed into the staff as she slammed it against the earth. A brilliant magic circle flared to life beneath her. Moments later, enormous vines burst from the ground. As Madame lunged, Lovegood's vines surged forward, intercepting the spider's strike. The monstrous creature paused mid-attack, sensing danger. With a swift motion, Madame leapt backward, narrowly evading the snaring vines. They scraped along her sides but failed to fully bind her, though they had clearly forced her onto the defensive. As Madame hovered in midair, Lovegood raised her voice, calling for the others to strike. The Baskerville triplets surged forward without hesitation, blades drawn, their movements swift and precise. Jurassico joined them, his massive frame charging into the fray with equal ferocity. Together, they launched a coordinated assault on Madame's back, striking at multiple points in rapid succession. The flurry of attacks created streaks of red and blue light, flashing like bolts of lightning across the spider's armored body. But they didn't stop there. The triplets pressed on, their swords slashing relentlessly at the thick, unyielding carapace. Jurassico followed suit, his mana-infused blade crackling with power. With a guttural roar, he unleashed everything he had, pouring his strength into a single, crushing blow against the monstrous creature's hide. As the triplets and Jurassico landed on their feet, they stared into the thick wall of smoke left behind by their combined assault. The battlefield was silent, the aftermath hidden behind swirling gray. Jurassico narrowed his eyes, uncertainty churning in his chest. He couldn't see the result, but he was sure he had felt his blade cut deep. He tightened his grip on his sword, the weight of anticipation coiling in his muscles. Then the smoke began to thin. His eyes went wide. A massive shadow loomed before them. Madame Eight Legs still stood, her colossal form rising like a nightmare through the haze. The monstrous spider's silhouette stretched across Jurassico and the triplets, casting them in darkness. Their faces froze, mouths parted in disbelief, eyes filled with dread. Across the forest, Granola, Sinclair, Dolores, and Hohenheim wore the same expression. A stunned stillness gripped them. Shock, fear, the creeping sense of impossibility. Even Lovegood, usually composed, was struck silent. Her lips parted, eyes darkening as the weight of what they faced truly sank in. Dread began to settle over her like a heavy fog. Under the pale light of the moon, Madame Eight Legs stood tall and unshaken. The limbs severed by the triplets and Jurassico lay scattered across the ground, but already new ones had grown in their place. The regeneration was so fast it would have seemed unreal if not for the evidence of her severed legs still lying nearby. With a deafening screech, Madame let out a roar that rippled through the forest, shaking the very trees. She gave the group no time to regroup, no chance to breathe. It was her turn to strike. Without warning, she began slamming her legs down in rapid succession, each impact quaking the earth. Explosions of dust and debris filled the air as her legs crashed down in a chaotic rhythm, turning the battlefield into a storm of destruction. Dolores, quick to react, conjured a shimmering barrier just in time, shielding the group from Madame's devastating strike. Behind it, the others stood frozen, their expressions unreadable, caught between shock and disbelief. The triplets and Jurassico didn't hesitate. Gritting their teeth in frustration, they turned on their heels and bolted, retreating from the relentless barrage. The pounding of Madame's legs behind them echoed like thunder, each impact a reminder of the monster's overwhelming power. Hybro couldn't help but glance back. The sheer destruction Madame unleashed sent a chill down his spine. Fear gripped him as he recalled what had happened just hours before. Vikier had pulled the triplets aside, taking them to a secluded part of the forest. He remembered raising his hand, stopping Vikier with a question that had weighed heavily on all of them. Will we really be able to kill that thing? The uncertainty in his voice had mirrored the doubt on each of their faces. Vikier had turned his back on the triplets when he answered, his voice steady and expression unreadable. He told them plainly it was impossible for them to defeat the spider. The words hit like a hammer. The triplets stood frozen, eyes wide in disbelief. He didn't look at them. Instead, he lowered his gaze, speaking quietly. The group already understood what it meant to face an S-tier monster like Madame Eight Legs. He remembered their faces at that moment. Jurassico staring down at his own trembling hands. Hohenheim shaking so violently he had to sit, gripping his right wrist just to stop it from quivering. They were all afraid of dying. But what terrified them more than death was doing nothing, standing back while their friends were slaughtered. That was why Lovegood and the others would still fight. Not because they believed they could win. Maybe deep down they all knew the truth, that they couldn't. But even so, they would fight. Vikier recalled the fire in Lovegood's eyes when she rose to her feet, turned away from her friend, and asked her to take care of Anna. Even in the face of despair, even when all hope seemed lost, Lovegood and the others had chosen to stand and fight until the very end. One of Madame's massive legs came crashing down toward Lovegood, but she reacted in time. Crossing her arms, she conjured a barrier that flared to life just before impact. The leg struck with brutal force, sending a shockwave through the shield and knocking Lovegood backward. Her eyes squeezed shut as tears welled at the corners. Gritting her teeth, she held the barrier firm, refusing to let it collapse under the crushing weight of the spider's limb. Elsewhere, Vikier dropped to one knee and pressed his palm against the earth, channeling mana deep into the ground. Power surged from his hand like a current, veins of energy splitting the soil beneath him. The earth beneath Madame Eight Legs began to crack, glowing faintly as Vikir's energy erupted upward like a volcanic surge. For a moment, Madame paused. Her many eyes darted downward, sensing the sudden instability beneath her. Jurassico stared in shock, the red glow reflected in his eyes. The way the ground crumbled beneath Madame, it looked almost like an aura explosion, though far more focused and precise. Hybro said nothing, watching in silence as Vikir's power shifted the tide. He stood frozen, stunned at first. Then his expression changed. Surprise flickered across his face as he recognized the mana pulsing through the ground. It was familiar. He had felt it before. His thoughts snapped back to hours earlier, to their conversation with Vikier. His expression had been grave as he laid out the plan. He told them that when he gave the signal, they were to strike with everything they had. No hesitation. No holding back. The triplets had remained silent, listening intently as Vikier spoke. Then, with a slight turn of his head, he glanced at them from the corner of his eye. Slowly, deliberately, he raised his index finger, a signal and a warning. This, he had said, was the only way to defeat Madame. This was Vikir's signal. Without wasting a second, he relayed the order to return to their positions. This was the moment Vikier had prepared them for, the one window where Madame, thrown off balance, could be struck. Jurassico and the triplets wasted no time, enveloping themselves in glowing layers of mana armor as their energy flared to life. At the same time, Dolores pressed her hands together, channeling her power into a support spell. A wave of magic surged outward, enhancing both Hohenheim and Sinclair. Their staffs lit with power, and with unwavering focus in their eyes, they took aim, ready for the final strike. Lovegood, her knees still trembling from Madame's earlier blow, forced herself upright. She gripped her staff tightly, defiance in her stance and unwavering resolve burning in her eyes. Then Hybro's voice cut through the chaos, loud and commanding, rallying everyone with a single call. This was the moment. Use everything. Hit her with everything you've got. The triplets and Jurassico responded without hesitation, surging forward like comets locked on their target, their mana flaring behind them. Vikier, meanwhile, rose slowly to his feet. Mana still pulsed in his right hand like a flickering flame, steady and controlled. His expression remained unreadable as he lifted his gaze to watch the others launch their final assault. His crimson eyes gleamed with quiet intensity, like a seasoned swordmaster who had seen too many battles. At that moment, he knew Lovegood and the others, they weren't just students anymore. They were becoming heroes. Lovegood raised her staff once more, calling forth her vines. They erupted from the earth, surging toward Madame in one final, determined strike. Dolores remained still, hands clasped tightly as she continued her chant, her voice unwavering. Nearby, Granola, Sinclair, and Hohenheim combined their magic, fire, wind, and poison twisting together in perfect harmony to form a single, devastating spear of elemental power. Above Madame, the Baskerville triplets and Jurassico appeared like shadows descending from the moonlight, their weapons drawn, ready to deliver the final blow. Madame's many eyes turned upward, locking onto them. Vikier watched, silent but resolute. They weren't strong yet, not in the way legends were, but they hadn't faltered. And that, he knew, was what set heroes apart. Not power, but will. These were the ones who would end the battle. They had chosen to stand, but Madame would not die quietly. Sensing the danger, she prepared to counterattack, her limbs bracing to strike. Vikier stepped forward, his bow in hand. He drew back an arrow, mana surging into the shaft until it shimmered with crimson light. His eyes gleamed, not with doubt, but with absolute confidence. He, more than anyone, understood the truth. Heroes are not born. They are forged through pain, through failure, through resolve. He could guide them, but they had to take the final step themselves. Vikier released the arrow. The force of it shattered the ground beneath his feet. The arrow tore through the air like a streak of fire and struck true, slicing clean through many of Madame's legs just as she prepared to attack. A deafening scream erupted from her mouth as pain overwhelmed her. Wounded, off balance, and enraged, Madame reeled. The others didn't falter. With eyes blazing with resolve, The triplets, Dolores, Lovegood, Hohenheim, Sinclair, Jurassico, and Granola let out a unified roar, their voices echoing with unwavering determination. The triplets and Jurassico charged forward, their weapons slicing through the air in perfect sync as they launched a frontal assault on Madame Eight Legs. At the same moment, Hohenheim unleashed a searing torrent of flame, aiming directly at her exposed back. The fire struck true, exploding on impact and engulfing her in a wave of heat and smoke.
Thanks for watching the latest part from the voice of Manhwa. Subscribe for more content and don't forget to comment below what you want to see in the future. Like and share for more.